and welcome. What I'd like to do is give you some insight on our next guest. This is Coach Donnie Kiefer. Coach Kiefer is the head football coach at Green Sea Floyds High School in South Carolina, and he has spent most of his career in North Carolina, which is where I met him, coaching high schools there. This is his 10th program that he has taken over. He is certainly a program builder, which we'll get into that. He spent 32 years as a head football coach. And when you look at his record, he has 240 wins as a head coach. When he left North Carolina, he was in the top 10 of nearly 400 coaches in the state of North Carolina to ever coach there. And he won 11 conference championships. He 4 times got to the Eastern or Western North Carolina finals. Made the playoffs 26 out of 32 years. Remarkable coach. He has coached in college and has coached obviously at the high school level, as we'll talk about some of that. And really what is intriguing about Coach Kiefer to me is that he has a very interesting background. There's not a lot of guys that we will talk to that have his powerlifting background. And, he's an accomplished powerlifter himself. He's won a national championship. He has the distinction of breaking world, American, and state powerlifting records as a competitor. And, he's sought after all over the country for speaking at strength and conditioning clinics. He's been married for, I think, about 36, 37 years now to his wife, Debbie, and they have 3 adult children. And what I'd like to give you some insight on here as you meet us on the podcast here, we have an opportunity to introduce you to Coach Donnie Kiefer. How's it going, Coach?
Going great, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Well, I'll tell you, the interesting thing as we start to look at this is, I've never met a guy quite like you, and I mean that in the best possible way, because it's, you're a guy that has had so much tremendous experience, and I look at this, and the short story on this is I was a transplant in Asheville, North Carolina. And at the time, you were coaching at Tuscola High School. Remember
right.
that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And what was something about that was I had just taken that. I left the Winnipeg Blue Bombers and was looking to start to work on a program there at Inca High School, which was a couple towns down the mountains from where you were.
Right.
Yeah. And what I liked about it was that you were there. I'd heard about you. In fact, one of our assistants, I think you remember, I think it was Ricky Brindley.
Yes, and Ricky just took the head coach at Smoky Mountain, head coaching position, yeah.
Okay, that's fantastic. He was talking about you, like you hung the moon, like you invented football, and I kept thinking to myself, there's something about it. He ended up going to Pisgah. He wasn't there with me for that first fall, but I kept thinking well, there's something going up at Tuscola. Let me do a little research about this. And that's how we ended up meeting each other. I think I called you, said, hey, Let me talk to you about some things. And I didn't really know other than a recommendation of what people were saying about you, and,
right.
And I kept thinking, I've been fortunate to have been influenced by a variety of different coaches. But I'll tell you what, you're in my top 5. I'm like,
oh, wow.
Yeah.
Boy, that's quite an honor. I appreciate you saying that.
Well, and people are going to see today when we have our conversation exactly why that is the case. Because I came in and no matter how you look at whatever experience I had, I was a neophyte when it came to coaching high school football.
Right.
My expertise happened to be on the offensive side of the ball. You were a kind of a guy that, I think about the way that you ran your programs. You could masterfully handle each aspect of your program. And that's what was unique to me. And the way that you built the programs that you've built was in the weight room was a big part of this.
Right.
And one thing that's sort of funny, and I think, and I'm not going to say who told me this, because when I was fortunate enough to get you on this interview, I texted a guy that coached against you, and
Right.
and I said, hey, look, I want to quote, what's it like facing a Donnie Kiefer team? And it took about an hour. Then I got a response. I wasn't sure. And here's what he said. I'll just read it word for word. He says, "Facing a Donnie Kiefer team is the ultimate challenge. They're always disciplined, mentally tough, physical, and ready to play."
Oh, wow.
And I won't say who it is because I told him I would not quote him, other than I would say that it was said by one of your longtime opponents.
Yeah.
And I think that in and of itself is a high compliment.
It is. Yeah. I'm very appreciative of that, whoever it was. So
Yeah,
I really appreciate that. That's quite a compliment.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and when I watched you there, and one of the things you helped me out with is you befriended me, and you didn't even know me. We were able to come up there, and we would never have played each other,
Right.
But the thing was, we scrimmaged against each other. You gave me insights on building a high school program, which I had no idea how to do. I mean, honest, that was not in my wheelhouse. You also gave me some insight on. I don't know if you totally remember this, but you gave me some insights on how Inca could beat Pisgah and how we could beat Asheville High, which
Right.
were the two of the nobody when I took the job thought it could be done. And in that 3-year period, we did both of those.
You did.
And we're fortunate because the stuff you told me helped me as we were building that program down in Candler.
Right. Well, don't tell the people at Asheville or Pisgah that. They might hate me forever.
Well, it sort of worked out because nobody else would have told me that because, you're one of the few guys that was able to beat both of those teams.
Right. Well, one thing, too, I want to say while we're at this juncture of our conversation here, when you came in, I did a lot of research, too, and started, reading about you and looking up what, where you had been, what you had done. And I was very impressed. So I wanted to meet you as well because I'm what I consider a lifelong learner. I never feel like I know everything. So when I can get around somebody like you with your type of experience, that was just like icing on the cake to me to get to know you, to get to pick your brain some, and to, just to get to see what you were all about. And, you're a very impressive coach in your own right, whether you had high school experience or not.
Well, I appreciate that. And, really why I wanted you to come on to this show is to answer a series of questions that I've put together. And this dialogue can go a variety of different ways. But, here you are, an accomplished football player yourself. You played at Lenore-Rhine,
right,
and you were a team captain in high school, and you're a good football player. And also, I mean, I just talked about your powerlifting background.
Right.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves here. That's pretty impressive. I've never met a coach that had that kind of lifting experience, and combine that with the ability to coach. And it's like, how did you get started in coaching high school football of all things? Because I looked at you, it's like, man, why is this guy in high school? But there's a whole lot of great coaches at every level, and I was fortunate to find you.
Yeah. Well, the big thing was I started really lifting and training when I was like 12 years old. And when I was in high school, when schools really didn't have strength programs back then, I was writing to colleges, asking them for copies of their strength conditioning programs and utilizing that. I had a weight room set up in my grandmother's garage. We didn't have a weight room or anything like that. So, I knew when I was 14 years old that I wanted to be a high school football coach. That's what I wanted to do, or a football coach, not necessarily high school. But anyway, so I set out to do what I had to do to make sure I could get into college, get college experience, as a player, and then do what I had to do to get my degree. Obviously, having to have a teacher certificate in order to coach, at least at the high school level. So that was my main motivation because I really wanted to do it. I'd always been in love with lifting. When I was young, I would get every muscle magazine you could imagine, read every article about everything. And, I was just one of those gym rat guys that just loved it more than anything. And obviously football too. at a young age, I played everything: football, baseball, basketball, everything, whatever was in season, like we all did back then. But then, I knew I wanted to be a football coach. Went to school. When I got out of school, I coached high school football for about 4 years as an assistant. And then I knew that I wanted to be a head coach at some point. And I felt like in order to be able to do that, I needed to get a little bit of experience on the college level. So I did that, ended up coaching at Davidson 85, 86, which was in the Southern Conference back then. My biggest reason for getting out of it, our head coach at the time was Vic Gatto, and he didn't want me to leave. And he was, wherever I go, I want to take you with me, that kind of thing, which was flattering, and I really liked Vic a lot, that kind of thing. But my wife was raising our children, and we had 3 small children at the time. And I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do, back in those days, there were no real limits and dead periods and stuff like that on recruiting. So we were just out all the time. It wasn't unusual for me to fly out on a Sunday afternoon and be gone all week, maybe fly back in Friday night, go to it again the next Monday. So it was just over and over. And I just started to feel a little bit guilty that I was missing time with my children. So, like I said, my wife was raising them. I was on the road. I was gone all the time. Even when we were in town, we were meeting to 12, 1 o'clock in the morning. So I wasn't getting any quality time. So I just thought, well, this will be a good time that I can go ahead and make that transition into the high school game. And even though I will still be working a lot of hours, I will, wake up in the same town every day where my children are. So that was the main motivating factor for me.
Wow. Yeah, I can see that now. I mean, it's like you're such a good family man in many ways. And I see, we're friends on Facebook, and I see you on there with your son and, the family and different things. It's like traveling and seeing everybody. And you're fortunate. I mean, I know a lot of guys in this profession that, it's like they talk family, but they don't actually live it. And
right.
Not by any fault. This profession in and of itself is consuming.
It is. It's very, very consuming. And, I do football 365 days a year. There's not a night that I don't go to sleep Xing and Oing or writing up strength programs or doing something schematically. But, I got to tell you, I've got to give my wife, Debbie, all the credit in the world. She is the epitome of what a football coach's wife should be. She's understanding. She's supportive. She's done everything for me in the programs we've been in. Everything from the head fundraiser, the film person, the athletic trainer. Everything you can imagine. She's done it.
Wow. And we had talked the other day, and I thought this was interesting. And, I'm from Eastern Ohio on the Ohio River there. And you're doing something that is the coaches and teachers in that part of the state do when they have their retirement set up. They cross over the state lines into West Virginia or to Pennsylvania, and they double dip per se, because it gives them an opportunity to get some more on the other side. Is that a reason that you basically left? It was your alma mater of all places. Right. You guys have turned that deal around.
Yeah, it was good. It was really good. I really enjoyed my time and the opportunity to go to Central Cabarrus, which was my alma mater. I got to spend my last 5 years in North Carolina there. But yeah, the whole double dipping and retirement thing, that was the entire issue of why we left. And it's really kind of a no-brainer. We all know that high school teachers don't make a lot of money, even coaches. And for me, I had in 31 years, and I could retire with full benefits and then come to South Carolina and work full time and get full pay. So, it's kind of a no-brainer. I mean, it's like getting an extra $40,000 or $50,000 for doing nothing and then going to another state and working. Sure. Even though we've earned it, through the years, but it's still just money that I'm not having to work for every day. And then I can work here. And actually it was a $20,000 a year raise to come down here. Oh, wow. The county I'm in, which is near Myrtle Beach, is, it's just a high income area. So, the tax base is such that they can pay good money down here.
No, that's tremendous. And like I said, what an opportunity. And, and I looked at your career, and this is the 10th program for you in high school. And, I talk about, there's turnaround guys, and then there's also program builders, and you're actually both of those. And most of the places you've been to, describe the process behind taking over a new program as you see it.
Well, the main thing is, and just about every program that I've gone into in my career, they were down. not very good, not winning, not doing anything real well at the time. And, when you come into a program like that, the morale is down, everything is down. So, that's kind of been my whole career. The main thing, I think, it's more psychological than it is physical. Now, there is a lot of physical to it in the weight room, great fundamentals, knowing schematically, what to do offensively and defensively, putting the players in the right position to win, all those kind of things. But I think it all boils down to the psychology of it all. When you go into a program where they're not winning, nobody is real positive. Nobody's real, thinking that they can be a championship team. So one thing I've always done when I go into a program, I don't care if they haven't won a game. And like some of the programs I've gone into, one team was 1-31 in the 3 previous years. We played for the Eastern Championship the first year. Another school I went to, they had won 4 games in 5 years, and we played for the Eastern Championship first year there. So, I mean, those kind of things can happen, but it all starts again with the psychology of it. So when you go in, the first thing you have to do is, to me, you can't be vague, and you can't go in and go, okay, guys, we've got to improve. We want to have a winning season. If I'm a senior sitting in a room and a coach comes in and tells me, hey, here's my 5-year plan, I'm thinking, what about me, coach? What about right now? What about some urgency for me? So when I go into a program, it's all about let's win championships now. Let's do it the right way. And here's how we're going to do it. And a lot of it starts in the weight room. But, when they find out, how we train, I've gone into programs before, and sometimes the coaches think, wow, we're not really doing enough. They're able to walk out of the weight room. They're not having to crawl out of the And I'm like, look, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to make them tired, or are we trying to make them fast, strong, and explosive? Because there's a difference. It's not all just about conditioning till they're dead all the time. So you have to train smart. You have to have a philosophy behind what you're doing. You have to have science behind it. And being a competitive lifter, that's always helped me. So when I go into a new program, and usually it's around March or April before we actually can get on the field. So everything is about the weight room and the speed program and that kind of deal. So once we get in there and they start seeing progress, and they start seeing their lifts go up, they start seeing themselves become more explosive athletes, they start to see changes and transitions in their body, then they start to buy in. Then you roll right into when you can go out in the spring and do skill development and stuff like that. Then you start talking about championship caliber football all the time. One of the things I've always said is, look, guys, whatever division we were in, somebody's going to be the 3A state champion this year. Why not us? Why are we going to concede? Why does Asheville have to be the champion? Why does, school XYZ have to be the champion? Why not us? And then here's what we've got to do if we want to get there. Then that carries right into 7-on-7s during the summer. And a lot of people say, and I know you're a passing guru with the run and shoot, and man, you do a great job. But, when we go to 7-on-7s, we're like, hey, we're going to win. This is a competition. We're not going on the field just to participate. We're going out there to win and to compete at a high level and learn how to win. And then when you add those things, great weight room progress, great mentality in the skill development into 7-on-7s, and you're going and you're competing and winning against some good football teams. Then you go into scrimmages, and coaches are the same way with scrimmages. Are like, okay, well, we're just wanting to look at personnel and stay vanilla, don't show anybody anything. We're going and I'm like, no, we're going against another program. We're going out there to compete and win. And I mean, it's not like one of these things where win at all costs and we're going to be ruthless, that kind of thing. Yeah. But just getting after it. And that's how when you begin to try to build a program that's down, that's what you have to do. Everything has to be about competing at a high level, have that psychological advantage when you walk on the field and expecting to win. And trying to get kids to expect to win who haven't won can be a challenge if you haven't done all the things leading up to that.
Yeah, no, you speak the truth, my friend. I think about that, and I was fortunate in many respects to have been at Kansas State with Bill Snyder when he first got there, and they were a perennial loser in many ways, and a lot of this stuff, it's like I almost wish, even though he's a Hall of Fame coach and all this stuff here, it's like when I hear you talk, it's like we were inexperienced in the turnaround, in that respect. I wish we would have had a little more of that fire in those formative years. We recruited it. I think Coach certainly knew what he was doing in that respect. And we built it in the weight room, which was another big part of it. I mean, our strength coach, a guy by the name of Jerry Palmieri, ended up being with the Giants for years.
Yeah, I've heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a boxer out of Montclair, New Jersey, and just did a great job in the weight room, I thought, and because I didn't know anything, so whatever we did was better than what I knew, and I thought it was good for us there. But the culture is what you're talking about, that you're building there, and there's so much that comes into us. Like a lot of times I notice these young men today, it's like they think if they get on social media and say it, that they are whatever they say.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Not in touch with reality, unfortunately.
No. And it's I think sometimes there's a lack of values that shows up there. It's a instant gratification type deal.
Definitely.
Always do the work, which I know you do, and your programs are known for that. As I've gotten to know you, one of the things is you seem to be. I know you're a man of high principle and values, and you believe in what you believe, and you've got a really good system that you teach these young men this. And how do your values show up in your work? I mean, I'm really intrigued by that.
Yeah, well, I think the main thing is, integrity and character are all the time things. You can't turn them on, you can't turn them off. And that's what I try to tell our kids. We want to be high character individuals in everything that we do. And, I'm a Christian too. So, I believe in in the scripture that says, do all things as unto Christ,
Right.
So I try to do everything to my absolute best. And I try to let them see that. And, I let them know I'm going to give you 100% in everything that I do. You never have to doubt that. I'm going to give you my absolute best. What I want from you in return is the same. But I don't want you to just be a good football player or good in the weight room. I want you to be good in the community. I want you to be a good person. I want you to be somebody that the younger students can look up to. I want you to be a guy who walks with integrity, with everything that you do, because, you've got a lot of people looking at you. You are representing me, my program. And people always say the team is a reflection of the coach. I want to be sure that right reflection is coming out, and we just talk about character, integrity, high moral values, and how you can't be one way away from the game and another way to the game, because at some point they're going to mesh and carry over, and the bad side's going to spill out, and we're not going to tolerate that within our program.
Yeah. Wow. Amen. I'll tell you, Coach, I think about what you just said, and I want to shift gears for a second, because it's not like in the NFL where it's like something happens, with the Philadelphia Eagles, everybody in the country knows about it.
Right.
And I'm going to shift for a second. Let's talk about last season. We're at the midpoint of the season. You had a fight break out in a game. You decided to dismiss your top two offensive performers and a defensive starter,
right,
along with suspending 12 other players because they came off the sideline.
Right.
It's like, what lessons did you and your players learn as a result of that decision you had to make?
Yeah, I think the main thing, to preface that a little bit, this wasn't the first strike against these guys. It's not like they lost their temper once and now we got to fight. It had been sort of an ongoing battle. And I'm the kind of guy, I'm all about second chances, and even third and fourth chances.
Sure.
I want to try to reach kids. I want to try to build them, help them to have a future. But at some point, when it gets to a breaking point, at some point you have to say, okay, I still love you. I'm still willing to help you. I'm still here for you, but you can no longer be a part of this because of the choices that you have made. And I don't think that we do student athletes or students in general, or even, in the professional ranks or college ranks, I don't think we do them any favors when we let them get past that point where anything goes. And so, I just felt like we were at the point there where, all right, we've got to go our separate ways. And it was tough because, like I said, those guys were producers. They were all good players. We played 2 games in a row. I don't know that we had any skill position starters on the field and lost
Wow.
those 2 games. And,
Oh, my.
but what it did was it allowed some of our younger kids to step up, some freshmen and sophomore running backs and, some other skill position players were able to step up. We had to transition. We were a spread team. We weren't throwing it. We weren't air raid, but we were spreading it, and spreading the run and, screens and all the stuff that we all do. And, we just had to pare it down, and we actually went wing T. And yeah, I've got a wing T background. So, yes. So, we jumped into wing T and, 1 week we're in the spread, next week we're in the wing T. We're battling for a playoff spot against a really good football team and went over there and beat them 22-6, I believe it was, running wing T for the first time. And our kids executed it well. If you saw them play, you would think, wow, they've been doing this for a while, but we hadn't. We'd been doing it 1 week. But what it all came down to is that mental toughness. Like, yes, we're without some players, but we're going to step up and we're going to go next man up attitude, and we're going to take it and do what we can do with what we have left. And because of all that, we became a better team. In the first round of the playoffs, we beat a very good football team late in the fourth quarter. Our kids battled, and we scored a touchdown late in the game that one of those freshman running backs I was telling you about went the distance about 60 yards, and we won the game. And we got defeated in the second round to the state runner-up, but we played them tougher than anybody else in the playoffs and lost by 8, I think.
Oh my, that's exciting that it turned around that way, because you don't know for sure how it's going to turn out, but you certainly that there's going to be lessons learned if you live by your principles, and that's what I think is the lesson for any young coach or even a coach that doesn't have the experience of dealing with young student athletes today.
Right. And when you talk about, building a program, I mean, if we would have let that go and we would have just kind of ignored it and all right, let's move on and let those kids stay on the team, what would the younger kids have learned? So, I mean, that's a huge part of building a program and building a culture. We can't let that kind of thing go on and think that we're going to have the kind of culture that we want to have. And because those younger kids saw that, and even the guys that were suspended but able to come back on the team, they learned such a lesson like that stuff's not going to go with Coach Kiefer. That's not going to happen. That's not going to go at Green Sea Floyd's program. We better toe the line if we want to be a part of it. Then they have to make a decision. Do I want to be a part of this program enough that I can be self-disciplined? And that's exactly what happened. They became a better team because of it.
Yeah, and it really you got to be excited about the future this season and from that point on.
Absolutely.
Wow, that's fantastic. Tell me something that's true that almost nobody agrees with you on.
Boy, good question.
Because you're a bit of a maverick. I mean, you do some things that are interesting. So I'm sure it's like, what? It's like, and it takes you to convince somebody, hey, this is the way, and they didn't see it until you were able to teach them that.
Yeah, I think a big part of it is that I would say as a player or as a coach, I think that you can't really be just a one position or one side of the ball guy. I think you have to know the whole game if you're going to be effective. And, to me, like I've been a defensive coordinator in some big all-star games. I've been the head coach in some national all-star games. For years early in my career, I didn't have much of a staff, so I had to kind of do everything, and which made it harder for me later on to learn how to delegate some things, which I'm getting better at. But I think, my opinion on that is, a lot of guys, they're just an offensive guy, so they get a head coaching job, and then they go into a program. The first thing they have to do is hire a defensive coordinator, and they have to put their career in the hands of somebody else on the opposite side of the ball and trust them. And it's not that you don't want to trust your assistants, but you do, because you do, but it has to be what you believe in as the head coach. Same thing on the other side of the ball. If you're a defensive guy and you say, okay, I've got my hand on the defense, bring in an offensive coordinator. Now you run what you want to run, that kind of thing. I mean, that's okay. But to me, I just feel like the better offensive coach you are, it's going to make you better on defense. The better that you understand the defense, the better offensive coach you're going to be. So, I think that crosses over. And I think it's the same thing for a player. Like if a player, let's say he's a wide receiver his whole life, and that's all he's ever done. The only thing he knows is what he's doing. He doesn't know the big picture, how everything fits together. I know coaches teach that, but I would say I would say that would be the one answer to your question, is that you have to know the whole game to be as effective as you can be. You can't just be a one side of the ball guy or a one side player. I just think you have to know it all.
Coach, as you say, what comes to mind, and I don't know if you're a fan of this guy or not, but I actually became a fan of him because what you're talking about is rare in college football because people are specializing so much. And, I see staffs and you see it because all these coaches are coming into your place. There are guys, when I talk to some head coaches at the collegiate level, it's like, hey, this guy is a master technician. He's a coach. That's what he does. This guy is a master recruiter. That's what he does. And he may not even understand how to get a guy in and out of a stance, let alone, but he can recruit, So you have a specialization at the collegiate level, and it gets even more specialized at the professional level.
Right.
But as you say that, I think here's a guy that would be, I guess, an enigma in many ways. Is I look at a guy like Scott Frost.
Right.
The coach at Central Florida that just got the job at Nebraska. He played defensive back in the NFL. He was also a quarterback.
Yeah.
He was a DC, I think, at one college, then became an OC. And I follow him. I'm thinking, wow, that's really powerful stuff. And I'm rooting for him because it's unique. It's different. I like guys that are a little different. And I see that he is a man of high principle and value himself.
Right. Yeah. A lot of respect for him. I mean, he does a lot of good things. And, I think the relationships with his players are a major thing. I think that his players are a reflection, or his team is a reflection of him, because I think he is a high character guy. Yeah,
he really is. And when you play for Tom Osborne, that probably helps a little bit.
Yeah, I would say.
And now as you think about these types of things and what I'm looking at is like, let's say you're a college guy, because we've got college and pro coaches that listen to this as well.
Right.
And when you think about this, you think, hey, what's Coach Kiefer talking about? It's like, geez, I can't, I'm at this point in my career, I'm a master on defense, or I'm a technically sound, the best linebacker coach around, whatever it is. What can I get out of that if I become a head coach? How does that work?
Right.
And, there's a few different things to think about at the collegiate level in that respect, when you think.
Yeah, I think so. But I think, like I said before, I think the more you know about offense, the better defensive coach you're going to be, and vice versa. And I know that all of these guys at the college level, the offensive guys, they know what you're trying to do to them on defense. The defensive guys know how you're trying to attack them on offense. What I think makes sense is when you can sit down and you can say in your mind, how can I beat what we do?
That's right.
How can I beat what we do? Not just the scheme, because everything looks good on the board, on the whiteboard. We know that everything looks good. But what little things, what intricacies, what coaching points, what details can I take care of that can beat what I'm trying to do to them? And to me, that's going to make you a better coach, because you're going to leave no stone unturned. You're going to figure out every little detail, every little step, every little aiming point, everything.
No, you got a good point. It brings me to a lesson I've learned. We're sitting here at Widener up in Philadelphia, Widener University, and one of the things we did this off season was we hired a new defensive coordinator. Now, our last one was fantastic, Bill Shuey. He's now with the Chicago Bears.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So he's a great football coach. But we hired. Actually, you might know the name, Dan Connor. Played linebacker for Carolina.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do know that name. Yes.
Yeah, Dan was the all-time leading tackler at Penn State. Just super good guy. And we got a chance to know each other a lot this spring. And what was interesting is he could come in my office. We'd sit in here and we'd clinic and we'd talk about, hey, I'm running this play. Show me how you would defend it.
Absolutely.
Because we're fortunate we don't have to teach anybody but our players. It's not like we've got other workloads. And so we're football all the time.
Right.
And it's been helpful to me because Dan, I say, hey, how do you teach that match coverage that Saban's always talking about? And he would get up there and say, oh, wow. Okay, that changes some distinctions of how I'm going to teach my offense based on that understanding. And I think that's what you may be talking
about. Absolutely. No doubt. And, it's like iron sharpens iron, like you're an offensive guru, no doubt. And I'm sure he's a defensive guru. When you guys can get together, you're helping him as much as he's helping you and vice versa. And, when guys do that and they can get together and really just throw ideas at each other, that's when you get better. Not just always hypotheticals or not what you think you're going to see, but how do you adjust? If he does this, what's my next move? I think that's a big part of coaching, which I mean, it's always being able to adjust on the run. Make the corrections that you need to make to get done what you need to do, and it's an ongoing thing. It's never just static. It's dynamic. It's always changing. So we have to know that, and we have to know what their ideas are on the other side of the ball.
No question. And let me shift gears on this one here.
Okay.
Tell me what you think, because I was reading through this material you sent me, and thank you very much. I mean, there's quite a bit of it here. Regarding your program and how you run things in the strength and conditioning. It's a comprehensive guide, to say the least. And one of the things you make a statement in here, and you say everybody lifts and runs. It's the methodology of the program that makes the difference. What do you really mean by that?
Well, you can go into any program in America, like which I say even on the document there. Everybody's going to bench, squat, clean. Maybe deadlift. Everybody's going to run wind sprints. Everybody's going to do agility drills. Everybody's going to do some form of jump training or something like that. Everybody's going to do stuff. So it's not in what you do. It's not that we do anything different as far as what we're doing than other people. It's how we do it. And it's how we train. We train everything by percentages. We use 3 different training models. We have a progression model, a static model, a speed model. We divide our program into 4 distinct phases. Each phase has an emphasis. There's some things that are included in every phase of the 4 phases, but some things are priorities over others at certain times of the year. That's like I was talking about conditioning earlier. I don't expect my football players to be in game condition in January.
Sure.
But what we're doing, it's different phases. The closer we get to the season, the more explosive, the more powerful, the more, more we're going to work on change of direction and linear speed mechanics and those kind of things. In the winter, we might be working more on, higher percentages, getting stronger, putting on lean mass. But, there's a list of like 12 or 15 goals that we have within our program, but they're segmented. And, for instance, I'm big on fast twitch muscle fiber development. I think that's where it's at for football. Football is a fast twitch sport. So, anything that you can do that's fast twitch is going to benefit you in the sport. Anything you do that's slow twitch is not going to be beneficial. Everything that we do is in the ATP PC system. Okay. That's the energy system that's going to take you from about 0 to 15, 20, some people 30 seconds. Beyond that, you get into the lactic acid system. Beyond that, you get into aerobic system. Well, football is not aerobic. So why do we need to do anything aerobic? So basically outside of say when we're doing, like if we're doing long intervals, like 300-yard intervals, that kind of thing, we might go a little bit over 30 seconds, but not much. Beyond that, if it lasts over 30 seconds, we're probably not doing it because that's taking us out of the correct energy system. And energy systems and muscle fiber type training go together. You can't do slow endurance training and think you're going to build fast twitch muscle fiber. And I've always said, basketball coaches, I guess, are the world's worst, at least at the high school level. I don't know about, I'm sure they all have strength coaches at the collegiate level, but at the high school level, one of the first thing that basketball coaches will do when they're getting ready to start their season, they'll take their kids out and do road running. They'll run a couple of miles, or they're running lap after lap after lap.
Yeah.
And, and I'm saying, all right, look, you want your basketball players to run fast and jump high and change directions quickly, yet you're training them all in a slow twitch manner and using the wrong energy system, the aerobic system. So you might be able to go out and run, if you put this to football, for instance, I might be able to go out and run 2 miles, but I couldn't last 1 quarter in a football game because I've trained the wrong energy system. So
you're right.
Carryover,
It's funny, Coach. It's like, as you say that, I think of when I was in high school, I would go from football to wrestling, and I quickly found out I was not in wrestling shape.
Right. Right.
It's a totally different thing.
No doubt.
Yeah. That, as you say that, what comes to mind, and we've had, we sit and we pontificate and have these discussions around our office. And when I think about football, I think, other than, to me, it's the greatest game in the world.
Amen.
And I look at it and I think, why is it the greatest game? And I try to explain to my wife, I said, because when you're watching And I think basketball is a great game. Don't get me wrong. They're all athletics is fantastic. But when you're out there and you're watching a basketball team run up and down the court and you see a guy like LeBron and you look around, it's like, there's nobody that looks like LeBron in the mall.
Exactly.
And so when I think about that, I say, it's like when you look at a football field, like I've had receivers that are 5'7" tall. That looks like a guy walking in the mall down the street. I've got 300 pounders. I've got different shapes and sizes. It's like, it's America. I mean, I think football, that's the beauty of it. You can always, every body type, no matter who it is, guys, girls, whatever, you can say, that's a guard. That's a split in. That's a quarter. Whatever it is, they have so we can relate to that sport because of this.
Yep.
And so, with that being said, we sit there, and I'm curious as to what you think about this. Like a lot of teams will do like these tests, like 300-yard shuttles and stuff, right when they come back for training camp.
Right.
And I think about if I'm an offensive lineman as opposed to a defensive back or a receiver, what is the value of training for a 300-yard shuttle test as a 6'5", 330-pound offensive lineman? And because we don't make a receiver, put 500 pounds on his back and squat it, it just doesn't make sense to me. What do you think about that when you got two totally different body types and positions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be a little more specific. I think you need to train what a guy is going to have to do. An offensive lineman, if he runs 20 yards, that's a long play for him normally. I mean, most of what's happening with him is in a small space. Now, defensive linemen a little more because they're having to get in pursuit and that kind of thing. But one thing that we've gone to, I mean, with our conditioning tests and things like that, we'll do like 30-yard shuttles, 60-yard shuttles, that kind of thing. None of the long stuff, because really, I mean, even a 60-yard shuttle where we go 30 and back, for time, every rep is time, that kind of thing. That's seldom going to happen for an offensive lineman, but it's more in the ballpark than running a 300 shuttle. Usually, I know one thing that we did at the school I was at before, and we haven't started that phase yet here, but one of the things that we did, like while we were doing multiple sprints, like we would do, say, 4 sets of 840s, for instance, with 30 seconds rest in between. So we would do that for our skill guys, but what we would do for the linemen is they would do sled pushes for the same amount of sets and reps for 20 yards. So now they were doing something that was beneficial, something that was going to work the correct energy system, but it was going to be more within the parameters of what we were going to expect them to do in a game. So to me, I think it's all relative. I know when I coached with Jeff Connors at East Carolina, everybody else was running 16 110s. DBs were running 8 300s with almost rest, because, they're probably running more than anybody on the field. So, so it was a totally different structure of how the conditioning was done. And I agree with that. And, getting back to the fast twitch thing, I've had college coaches come in and talk to me and say, hey, I really like what you're doing. I really like the structure, but explain something to me. Why do you not build an aerobic base first? And I'm going because it's not an aerobic sport. So why do we now we do the heck out of like speed endurance.
Sure.
Like we're going to do enough that we can play a game and not even fatigue. But we're not going to go out and run laps and run miles and do things like that, because there's absolutely zero carryover. If I do 32 40s, there's going to be a lot of carryover because I'm working the correct energy system. If I'm running a mile, there's zero carryover because it's all slow twitch and it's raw muscle fibers.
Wow. Yeah, that makes so much sense. It's like you look at this, and sometimes you take a program, because I don't know if you've seen it, but back in the day, was it Boyd Epley at Nebraska?
Nebraska. He was like the father of the strength training in America. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he came out with some program that high school coaches at all levels would buy it, and you plug in your formulas and you do this. And I'm like, okay, great. Because he was developing guys. They had a huge walk-on program that guys with scholarship going to the National Football League. And he had some success there, but he's also at Nebraska.
Right. I'll
It's a
never
little
forget.
different.
I met him at the AFCA convention, I guess, around 1985.
Okay.
And I remember talking to him a little bit, and he told me that they had 250 kids in their program in Nebraska.
Wow.
250. A lot of them walk-ons and red shirts and everything else. But can you imagine trying to train 250 kids?
You'd have to be at a place like that to do it. I mean, it's. I think that's the name of their training center now, is the Boyd Epley Training Center up there, and it's. He's a legend when it comes to that, and certainly one of the forefathers of strength training for football.
Right.
And I think that one of the things you were talking about strength training, and we got into some of the linear type of conditioning and so forth. You make an interesting point regarding agility,
right?
And there's you're known the way you. Correct me if I'm wrong. The way I understand it is there's a programmed agility, and then there's a reactionary agility.
Correct.
What is that, and why do you do it in that particular fashion?
Okay. Well, programmed agility, or at least what I call it, programmed agility is when we're doing things like, say, a W drill, W run, pro shuttle, 3-cone drill, those kind of things where it's change of direction, but ahead of time where the change of direction is going to take place. Now, that kind of stuff is vital for our athletes, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because they know where they're going. They know, where the cut's going to be. They know where the route's going to be run. The tailback knows where, general aiming point where he's supposed to go. Even the linemen, they know aiming points where they're going. So, but then reactionary agility is things like come to balance. It's when you don't know where the cut's going to be. Really beneficial for defensive guys. So they have to react off of a stimulus. So they got to be full speed, be able to decelerate, then reaccelerate in a new direction without wasting any movement. So we train that with different come to balance drills and things like that. And it's really, like I said in one of the articles that I wrote, and I think one of the ones I sent to you, everybody's going to look good in programmed agility. When you find out if a guy really has agility is when he can react to a stimulus and then change directions quickly. And so that's something that we train. We just don't take for granted that a kid can do that. That's why kids get shook down. That's why a back can't stick its foot in the ground and cut when he should have. It's because they're not working that kind of stuff. It's always just, okay, I know I'm going to this cone, then that cone, and then back across the middle. If that's the only kind of agility you work, I think you're missing the boat. I really think that the reactionary piece is something that a lot of people overlook. I think another thing that a lot of people really, really do not emphasize enough is deceleration. We as speed and strength coaches, we're always talking about accelerate. How do you decelerate? Do you practice decelerating? Do you just expect that they can decelerate? Usually people do one of two things when they're trying to decelerate. They either lean back and get their body weight behind them, or they pat their feet too many times. They have to chop down. They can't come to a stop. And that can be detrimental in some situations. That.
It's so funny. Here's what that brings to mind. I was a head football coach at Texas State down in San Marcos, Texas. And I hired a guy that we had brought in to be my strength coach. So we had brought in we consulted with him, with our strength coach at Texas Tech did, which is where I was prior to this. And this guy's name is Nick Kairos. Okay. And Nick Kairos, he's passed away since he had bone cancer years ago. He was a good friend. And I hired as my strength coach. And when I listened to you talk, here's some things that he taught me in our season together there. One, he said that and this was what shocked us when we looked at our program in Lubbock. It's like most kids don't know how to bench press. And the bench press is actually extremely important in a young man's ability to run, because of the way that the nervous system is and the 90-degree angle and working it through.
Definitely.
And then he's the other guy that the first guy that really showed me about what deceleration was. And he would watch us in practice, like our receivers, because in the run and shoot, you're route adjusting, you're doing all these different things. And we pat our feet before we make a break. He goes, Coach, I'm going to tell you, because I'm not a receiver, but I know movement. Okay. And I go, what do you mean, Nick? He goes, well, he called it post-position speed step was the terminology he used. Now, understand, Nick Kairos, which I should have led this off, was Bear Bryant's first strength coach.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so this guy's legit. Okay.
Yeah.
he took a guy, I'm trying to think who it is, when he was at Alabama, that was the third fastest 100-meter guy at Alabama in the
Right.
track team, and he won the gold medal by training him within a year.
Wow.
Olympic gold medal.
Wow.
So working all these things. So Nick and I got to know each other. In fact, I've got a gift I want to send you, okay? Because I found an old a clinic tape of him talking, and he actually created a drill tape for me that I found in an old High 8 video.
Right.
And it was the production that we did on the way he taught his progression for speed development and change of direction.
Right.
It's
That's
pretty
awesome.
neat. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
Yeah, and the only guy around, there's a couple guys out there. A guy named Dale Basquette. I don't know if you've heard of Dale.
Heard of him, yeah.
All right, well,
He's got some speed materials out there.
Yeah, he's in California. Yeah, he and Dale were like this. Nick was more of a powerlifting guy,
right,
and understood that. And he was a champion powerlifter, boxer. That was his background. But I thought that was interesting the way he would bring it to us. And now our receivers, I mean, he was the first guy that in a very short period, in a summer, as he was doing the phase training as you do,
right.
I noticed in those last couple months prior to the season, guys were dropping their 40s by 0.2.
Oh, yeah.
It was remarkable.
Well, that's the thing, that I've told people, throughout the years. And I tell a kid, say, look, I cannot change your genetics. Mm-hmm. You have, whatever percentage of fast twitch fibers you have, whatever percentage of slow twitch and all the crossovers, I cannot change that. I can't affect it, but I can affect which ones we train. And I said, here's the thing. If you have any flaw, you think about this, 1/10 of a second in a 40 is about as quick as you can blink your eye. Seriously. That's quick. So if you can make your technique flawless, everything from the start phase to the acceleration phase to the full velocity phase, if you can become flawless in your technique or nearly flawless, it is not unusual to take 2 or 3 or even 4/10 of a second off of your time, depending on your level of experience. Yeah. But it's very doable. But the technique has to be perfect. And that's guys like Basquette and guys like that you're talking about. That's what you train. You can't change their genetics, but you can change their technique and their and how they train it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I love talking to you about this, and I'm sure our listeners are fired up about this as well, because it's just the wealth of information you have. And for people listen to this, I think one thing that we're fortunate, because Coach Kiefer actually had sent me, like I talked about, all these 20-some pages of information. It's an outline. He could probably write a book that would. I looked at this and started thinking, you know what? If we got together and you wanted to publish a book, it'd probably be a good 300-400 pages. I'll be honest. Right. You could expand.
By the time you got into all the detail. Yeah.
Oh yeah, and it's good. And we're gonna set this thing up so it's downloadable on this website, below this broadcast. And I think thank you very much for that.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
Yeah.
And one thing I'd like to get into a little bit for that a lot of people don't understand is, when I'd spoken earlier about, in the weight room, when we're talking about, the 3 models that we use, progression is self-explanatory. Progression is when each set gets heavier, as you progress upward. Static is when each set, would be the same. Like say you were doing 80% for 5 sets of 5, but the speed model is probably one of the most important things that we do. And a lot of it is, kind of goes hand in hand with some stuff that Louis Simmons, and his West Side people do, and he's a great researcher. He's rough around the edges, but everybody loves him. He's a great, he's just a wealth of information about power training. And, but one thing that we do, and it's ironic, and I put this in the program, there's 2 ways to build fast twitch muscle fiber. One is to, like, if you're handling a heavy weight and every muscle fiber has to fire in order to be able to move that weight. Yes. But you don't want your kids lifting heavy all the time. These are athletes. These are not power lifters. Okay. So, some of them may get into it, but that's not what we're training them for. So you don't want heavy weight on their back all the time, or, on the bench or whatever you're doing. So the other way that you can build fast twitch muscle fiber is to use a submaximal weight, but push it as fast as possible, because really the body doesn't know, all all your body knows is that you're recruiting every muscle fiber within you all at one time. And that's how you can become more explosive. And I read an article a few years ago that has stuck with me. Jeff Connors at East Carolina is actually the one that gave it to me. I still have it. And I can't remember who the physiologist was, but it was one of the top physiologists in the world. And they had done research and documented clinical research that showed that the optimum percentage of weight to use to create the most force and the most explosive power was 30% of your max.
What?
Now nobody's going to train at 30%. We never train at 30%. Wow. Never. That's too light. But now we will do speed sets. Like we'll do low box squats where we come to a dead stop. And I call that, now here's another thing. I don't want to get off key, but what we'll do is we'll go from 50 to 60% at 2% per week. And we're doing sets of doubles with only 30 seconds rest in between. But what we're doing is, number one, we're below parallel. Number two, we're at a dead stop. So we're using no kinetic energy, no rebound, none of that. Yeah. Everything's from a dead stop. And we're doing like anywhere from 12 to 8 sets of doubles, depending on the percentage. And the higher the percentage gets, the lower the volume. Yeah, I mean, the lower reps and sets, but the volume stays close to the same. So it's all about bar speed, compensatory acceleration, which just means you compensate by having better leverage. You know how when you get like out of the sticking point of a lift, whether it's bench, whether it's squat, you have a place where it's tough. Then when you get beyond that point, it becomes a little easier. So most people ease off a little bit. They don't continue to push. Okay. They push just fast enough to finish the lift. So compensatory acceleration just means accelerating all the way through the lift until you get almost to lockout. And we do that.
Let me ask you, not to when you say that, what comes to mind? How did I see guys using these chains all the time in the weight room. Does that have any thing to do with that, or why do people do
what
that?
chains do, and I've used them in my own training as a power lifter, but I don't use them with kids because I feel like they need to just, they need to master technique. But what chains do is actually they overload at the top. They make it lighter at the bottom because the chain is on the floor. As you get closer to lockout, it adds more weight. Gotcha. And bands are the same thing. So as you get closer to lockout, the further you pull the band or push the band, the harder it gets because it's adding resistance to the bar.
Gotcha.
So, anyway, so doing those speed sets, it really creates, and like I said, we go from 50% up to 60% in 6 weeks, 2% at a time. But what that does, it creates such power because it don't sound like much weight, but think about this. If you're a 600-pound squatter and you're going 50%, that's 300 pounds from below parallel from a dead stop, pushing as fast as you can. That's still not a lightweight. So when you think relative to anybody, if you're going 60%, that's 360 pounds from a dead stop.
Okay, so Coach, give me some more insight in how you utilize speed sets in training.
Okay. Again, as we were saying previously, what it does is when you come to a dead stop and you're not using any kind of momentum, what it forces you to do is to make every muscle fiber fire in order to get the weight moving, because you're at a dead stop. You have no, you have no stretch reflex. You have no kinetic energy to fall back on. It's all just muscle fiber firing all at once. And the more rapidly that you can get all the muscle fibers to fire together, the quicker you're going to move that weight. And we were talking about compensatory acceleration. Obviously, you're pushing all the way through the weight as fast as you can go until right at lockout. And you can do that on bench and you can do it on squat. With cleans, it's already built in, because a clean, you have to pull it as fast as possible. That's why cleans and snatches and things like that are so fast twitch. But the truth of the matter is, like I was saying, 30% is what has been proven to be the most explosive or create the most force, the most power output is 30% of max. That's unrealistic. Nobody can really train that light. But the reason that is because any open end movement where you never have to decelerate. Like I know at East Carolina with Jeff, we used to do bench throws where the kids would come down, with lightweight, maybe 135, and they would actually throw it out of their hands. And 2 spotters would catch it, put it back into their hands. Then they would throw it again. Same thing like that. Or we would, they would do squat jumps, where they would go down into a squat so that there was no no end to it. So they didn't have to decelerate. So that's why things like plyometrics and things like med ball series and stuff like that, that's why they're so effective for building power, is because there's no deceleration. They're open-ended. There's no closed end to it. You don't have to decelerate.
So, Coach, one of the things that's intriguing to me is I see high school programs out there that are starting powerlifting programs, which you and I think is fantastic. Powerlifting is a great sport. How does your comprehensive program build upon powerlifting to help young men become better football players?
Right. Well, one thing is powerlifting is an extremely fast twitch sport. When you get to high level powerlifters like national and world type competitors, these guys are highly explosive, highly fast twitch. But that's only one piece of the puzzle. Where it really helps you is in technique. To be a powerlifter, I mean, like squat, for instance, you have to have correct shin angles. You have to be below parallel. So you got to have great flexibility. You have to be able to move the bar faster. You're going to get pinned to the floor, those kind of things. So those things are carryovers, but the powerlifting part of it is good in building strength, but that's just one small phase of it. And that's why what we do is so much different. It gets back to different ways to build fast twitch muscle fiber. We don't want to go heavy all the time. That's why we use that speed model. That's why we're so big into plyometrics. We're so big into linear speed training. We're so big into all kinds of change of direction. So the powerlifting part is good. And what probably the best thing about the powerlifting thing is that kids can go and compete. And I like to take my kids to compete, because in the winter and early spring, you can look at these kids and you're not just saying every day, we got to get stronger. We got to get stronger. We got to get stronger. When you're taking them to a meet and they're training for a meet, and what they're doing is that now they have a goal. They have a short-term goal. So now they're training hard to win that competition. But in the long run, it's making them stronger so they can do better on the football field, the athletic field, whatever sport they play. So it has its role, but it is certainly not the end-all, be-all to what we're trying to do. We want to train them to be as athletic as possible. And that goes back to training in phases like we talked about earlier.
Yeah, no, and that's what's great about your program. It does have everything trained in phases and emphasizes different parts of what you're trying to build upon to ultimately have a good football player.
Yeah. And I tell our kids all the time, if you're big and slow, if you're big and strong, but you can't move, you're going to be totally ineffective on the football field. It's going to make no difference. I don't care if you squat 600 and bench 400. If you can't move, you're not going to help anybody. So, like I said, that's just a part of it.
Let me ask you one more question regarding the actual strength and conditioning, because you see in this a lot out there, and is the whole phenomenon of CrossFit.
Yeah.
And what people are doing with this. And, even CrossFit, if you get on their website, they've got CrossFit football, there's a side deal for them.
Right.
What do you notice about that? And what is your professional opinion about that?
Well, number one, to me, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. To me, CrossFit is a lot more endurance based. So, football's an ATP PC system sport.
Yes.
We're not trying to get in the lactic acid system and in the aerobic system. So number one to me is it's the wrong energy system. Now they do a lot of explosive stuff as well, which is fast twitch, but I just don't think there's that much carryover. I think, I think what CrossFit does is good. If I'm 28, 30, 40 years old and I'm not playing sports anymore and I want to have a hard, lean body and keep myself in shape, I think it's great. As far as for football players, I wouldn't particularly want my kids training that way, just because, like I said, it's the wrong energy system. It's too much endurance based. And I think they overtrain. That's one of the things that people don't understand. Overtraining is worse than undertraining. At one point in my powerlifting career, I chronically overtrained to the point, this is when I was young and dumb or dumber. and back then I didn't understand overtraining. I was doing really well. I was 148 pounder squatting 575. And I'm thinking, dang, if I train harder, I'm going to get even stronger. And so I, got into that whole thing, more is better. And I chronically overtrained and my lifts went down. And I was getting ready for the state meet and my lifts were down and I was all depressed. And finally I talked to a guy who knew a little something and he let me know, you're overtraining. So, I think that's terrible, in any sport, overtraining. That's just like overuse injuries, kids playing baseball, year round, that kind of thing. So, but overtraining is probably much worse than undertraining.
Got it. That makes some sense because I see it all the time, and it seems to be a popular thing more than anything else. And some coaches, it may be the way that they personally train, and they think, well, I feel so good.
Hmm.
But what if I would have done this when I was 17 years old, and
Right.
and and that's not necessarily the scientific basis for it.
Right. And I can think of two kids right off the top of my head. Both were from Tuscola, who, when CrossFit became a big fad,
Mhm.
and that was the thing. I had two different guys that went and tried it, and I tried to tell them, hey, this is not for you right now. You need to wait till you get out of football to do it
Sure.
in the off season or whatever, but not now. And both of those guys severely overtrained and just, put it to side and said, hey, coach, you were right. That's just way too much volume, way too hard on our bodies, and we couldn't do that and do football at the same time.
Yeah, that's great insight for guys that are out there working with their players. Coach, I got a last question for you.
Okay.
All right, and I guess I don't have to be politically correct when I give you this question, but
Oh, you're not going to get me in trouble, are you?
no, it's not one of those things. It's like,
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
yeah, it's not usually a question like this goes, if heaven exists. Well,
Hmm.
I know what you believe, so.
Right.
Um, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Uh, well done, my good and faithful servant. I've always said that, at the end of my days, when I stand before God, it's not going to be how many games did you win, how many powerlifting records did you break, that's not what he's going to ask me. He's going to say, what did you do with all of these kids, thousands of kids that I brought your way? Did you at least let them know who my son was, Jesus Christ? Did you at least tell them? Now, everybody makes their own decision, but did you show Christ? Did you let them know? If not, I feel like I'm going to be held accountable for them. Not that it'll cost me my salvation, but I feel like I'm accountable for everybody that God brings across my path. So
Well,
well done, my good and faithful servant.
great, Coach. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. It's an honor to call you a friend. It's a
Same here. I
really
feel the
fun.
same.
Yeah, and I know you're there for me, and I'll do anything for you whenever you need my help. I'm always there for you in any way.
Well, it's just a pleasure. I just want you to know how much respect that I have for you as a coach. And, I was thinking the other day, you are one of those guys that thinks outside the box in a lot of different ways, which I respect. And, I don't think enough people do that. Everybody gets hemmed into one corner and, hey, this is what everybody else is doing, and this is how people do things, so let's do it that way. But you're an innovator, in my opinion. So a lot of respect for you, Coach.
Well, Coach, thanks a lot and good luck. It's a wonderful situation you've got down there, and I hope to get down there and see you soon.
Man, if you ever come down to Myrtle Beach, you got a place to stay. So
Well, thanks. I may take you up on that.
absolutely.
All right. Take care, Coach.
All right. Thank you, Coach.